This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, a conversation with Ethan Young. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
And on this episode, we're talking with Ethan Young. His book, The Battles of Bridget Lee, Invasion of Farfall, comes out on October 4th. But before we get to that conversation, we want to let you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by the great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll see that those discounts are 20 to 35% off of the cover price, and every single month you're going to find some unbelievable specials. Sometimes those specials will be at 45% off cover the price, sometimes at 50% off cover, but many times you can find discounts that go higher than that.
And Derek, you know, we always talk about the bundles that are available on DCB Service, and it's so much cheaper in getting them by bundle than it is buying individual comics. And there are so many great bundles on DCB Service this month. We've got a Valiant bundle with the 9 newest Valiant titles for 50% off. We have a bunch of the DC Rebirth bundles going on. There are just so many bundles that you really have to see. But I also wanted to point out that the person that we'll be talking to today, Ethan Young, has 2 books available for significant discount. The main book that we're talking about, Battles of Bridget Lee, Invasion of Farfall, you can get that for $6.59, and that's 40% off the cover price. And Ethan's previous book, Nanjing, The Burning City, is $14.99. That's 40% off at DCB Service.
Yes, what a great way to introduce yourself to the work of Ethan Young by getting his books through Discount Comic Book Service. Their website is dcbservice.com. You got to go there for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your comics there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you.
Yes, do that.
Well, Andy, this is an interview that you and I have been talking about for a while. I think it was early this year, maybe even last year, when we heard from Ethan Young about our review of Nanjing, because you and I did that almost exactly a year ago. I think it was September of 2015. We did that in a review show. He got in touch with us after that, and that evolved into this loose plan of getting him on the show.
Yeah, and I'm so glad we did, because Nanjing, The Burning City was one of my favorite books from 2015. And when you told me the possibility of interviewing Ethan was coming up, I was really excited about that, and in reading his new book, which we did.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and get to that interview.
Yeah, let's do that. And we'd like to welcome to the show today Ethan Young. Ethan's new book is from Dark Horse, and it's called The Battles of Bridget Lee, Invasion of Farfall. Now, you've probably may be familiar with Ethan's earlier book that came out last year, Nanjing, The Burning City. But Ethan's also done a lot of other things, webcomics, and his first graphic novel, Tails, Life in Progress, and we'll probably hit on all of those at some point today during the interview. But Ethan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's really exciting. I really enjoy your show.
Well, that's good to hear. Glad to have you at the Comics Alternative.
Right. I doubt you have guests who say they hate the show, right? I'm assuming.
They haven't admitted it in public.
Okay.
So I suspect there may be one or two that we've interviewed that may not be a regular listener of the show, let's just say.
Okay.
I thought I'd start things off by telling you I told you off mic about how much I enjoyed Nanjing, the Burning City. That was one of my favorite books from last year. And I noticed there are some similarities between that book and Bridget Lee, but there are also some unique differences. Can you talk a little bit about what happened between Nanjing and Bridget Lee? Was Bridget Lee something you always had planned, or did it come as a result of something that happened during Nanjing or after?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I was approached by my editor at the time after Nanjing had wrapped up, and we were still maybe like 5 or 6 months before Nanjing was going to be released. And he told me, it's probably time to start thinking about your next project while the iron is still hot. And I gave him a few pitches, and one of them was a sci-fi allegory of Mulan. And, my editor, Jim Gibbons, at the time felt that from what he saw from my pitches, he felt that the Mulan story was probably a little bit closer to my heart, which it probably was. It was just something like an idea that was in my head, just kind of being thrown around for the past decade or so. Every now and then I would just kind of come back to it and revisit it and just look at the elements and see what was still interesting from my initial ideas and stuff. And so, the war aspect of Bridget Lee is probably directly influenced from having worked on Nanjing for 2 years. And it certainly influenced it a little bit aesthetically as well. But I think more than anything, the setting of Bridget Lee is just kind of the appropriate backdrop for some of the other elements that I really want to discuss in Bridget Lee, such as like displacement and things like that.
Yeah, I want to echo what Andy had said a moment ago, and that is there in the experience of reading this first book in the Bridget Lee series. I'm assuming is I couldn't help it.
I hope so. Yeah.
Well, it reads like it, and I want to talk about that later. But in reading this first book, I couldn't help but think of some of the similarities between this new one and Nanjing, the Burning City, because you do have a country or a people under siege. You do have an invading force in the Battles of Bridget Lee, this first book, Invasion of Farfall. It's the Marauders. In Nanjing, it was the Japanese coming into Nanjing, and so there's some similarities there, and also in terms of the battle scenes visually, there are links there. But they are strikingly different in terms of Bridget Lee is a science fiction narrative where you can make things up, make many things up. But with Nanjing, you were wedded to historical fact.
Yeah, for the most part. Even with Nanjing, there was just like a little bit of artistic license I took, mainly in the form of the characters. I'm sure you guys noticed that like the characters from Nanjing, the Burning City, are clearly archetypes, and I did that on purpose because, when you have archetypes, what you have really is a relationship, an immediate relationship between the audience and the character. Because every reader is well aware of archetypes, whether or not they can describe them perfectly, because you see them all over books and movies and TV shows. Like, archetypes are just there. And so the captain is essentially, kind of like the man with no name. It's just this stoic loner survivor warrior hero who has his own set of ethics and his own very staunch moral code, and that moral code is tested by the circumstances. So with Bridget Lee, Bridget is a little, there's some archetypal, if that's the word, archetypal elements in her character, that being one of a reluctant warrior. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where a lot of the tension comes from. It's, the audience is waiting for this reluctant warrior to, quote unquote, take up the mantle again, to pick up the sword or the weapon again. And, those are the story elements I like to play with, because I know the audience is already familiar with it. So it's time to, you could tease them a little longer, a little shorter, and you can subvert them in small ways. In Nanjing, I subverted some archetypes just a little bit because, you definitely want to keep things a little fresh too.
Ethan, I really like how you mentioned that one of the big themes of Bridget Lee is displacement. And in this book and also in Nanjing, it comes across really strongly that obviously things are not as they should be. And for things to change, somebody has to do something to make it right. And I really like the fact that you chose a female protagonist, Bridget Lee, for your for this book. Was it always a plan to have it to be a female protagonist, or can you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
Sure. Yeah. But like I mentioned before, there's the soft allegory of the Mulan folktale, which was one of my mom's favorite folktales. So just in that, there was always going to be a female protagonist. But the specifics of how it came about Bridget Lee, well, first off, there's the fact that she's Asian American. I know countries as they are now don't really exist in Bridget Lee because it's so far in the future, but it's very clear that she's Asian and Western at the same time. And then on top of that, there are certain elements of her character that are taken from like my mom's personality. Like my mom grew up in communist China, and she always told me about how hard life was during that time. And she also worked in medicine, but she lived in one of those like really poor villages where she just got like vocational training. Like she wasn't like a registered nurse or anything like that. It was just a small town where people just trained, and then they had to do something. So there's some inspiration from that. And the other big influence, you mentioned, Andy, displacement, was I wanted to touch a little bit on the ramifications of having a one-child policy, which China had for many, many decades. My parents actually came over to America in 1982 to have a third child. At the time, there was a two-child limit, and they really wanted a girl. I have two older brothers. My mom always wanted a girl, and then she had me, so 3 sons. so culturally, that's amazing luck for her. But Bridget Lee's really short, so I didn't really get to delve into the cultural aspects of that too much. But I do touch upon it a little bit because I think you see it in countries all over the world, and even a little bit in America, how you see kind of this patriarchal system that does generally favor boys over girls. And so that's one of the elements that I wanted to touch upon, because I think it creates a much more, like, it touches upon the very interesting dynamic that we have with gender in our society. The reality is, it's like, you can come up with any reason. You can come up with any reason why you preferred a boy over a girl during the one-child policy in China, but it all boils down to misogyny. Like, that's really what it is. That's all it really was. People just have a lot of BS reasons for why they did it.
Well, in addition to what you just said in terms of your discussion of children and the way that children, especially regarding gender, are seen in this world, how it plays itself out in the Battles of Bridget Lee, kids play a significant role in this book. Even from the very beginning. In fact, one of the first scenes is Bridget Lee being visited by the twins Sterling and Jane. And, I mean, not only is that an effective way of providing some exposition, right, but it also establishes the fact that these two young girls are just a few of the kids there at this settlement who are going to play a significant role. Now, I noticed that, on the back of this book, it's listed, I guess, for bookstore owners and librarians as juvenile fiction. And so I'm curious, with the emphasis on children as actors in this first book, was that a decision that went along with maybe any audience assumptions? In other words, did you specifically want to write, let's say, a young adult graphic novel, and maybe in that way you wanted to include more children in the narrative?
Yeah, a little bit. I think you described it perfectly well there. When I first pitched the series, I think I had like a 5-issue or 6-issue miniseries in mind, so it was originally going to be slightly longer as a first major story arc. But I'm sure, as you're well aware, with like the direct market, like miniseries just really don't do well, especially with properties that aren't established franchises already. Like if my series was named Mass Effect, like I would have no problem doing like selling a miniseries and then selling a trade of that sustained itself financially. But since this was like a brand new property, and I also couldn't use the name Mulan because Dark Horse had just published another comic book series called Mulan Revelations, like several months before I pitched this. So, that kind of screwed my pooch a little bit there. I couldn't I couldn't use like the one name that basically like the one title that could encapsulate all the elements of the story clearly to people. And I mean, the name Mulan would feel a little anachronistic for a sci-fi story, but at the same time, once you see that name, it's like, as an audience member, you're like, whoa, I know what that story's about in some fashion. So, yeah, like doing so, when I pitched the story, my editor told me, well, from what I'm reading, I feel like this could be probably young adult. There's no call for extreme violence or other extreme adult content, and I felt the same. My son had just been born. Like I started this book basically when my son was already 3 months old, and I felt like I should have more material in my bibliography that he can read one day at a younger age. I think Nanjing doesn't have too much extreme violence in it, and a lot of it is off panel. So I think it's done. I think the violence in Nanjing is tackled, in my mind, a little bit more tactfully than I've seen other people try to tackle that kind of subject matter. Mm-hmm. So, like when he's probably like 8 or 9, I'm hoping my son can read like Bridget Lee, and hopefully he'll like it. He might think it's crap. I don't know. I don't know what his taste is going to be at that time. But yeah, like I wanted to give these kids a voice, and I wanted them to have agency, and I wanted these characters to kind of feel like I wanted to take these characters that you generally see marginalized in sci-fi stories and just give them a much larger and emphasized role in the action. So there.
Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that you handled it, I think, maturely and seriously, and didn't make the kids, I don't know, overly goofy or overly lovable or anything even approximating what we have with the Goonies.
Oh yeah. That probably wouldn't have fit if I made them a little bit too
wacky,
I guess, cartoony.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird to use the word cartoony as like a pejorative, but for the sake of this discussion, we'll say that.
Yeah.
My other cartoonist friends would probably be upset by that.
Well, Ethan, you may not know, I'm a librarian, so this is always something that's interesting to me, and especially because we haven't received this book yet in the library, and I'm not sure whether they're going to put that in the teen section or whether they're going to put it in the juvenile section. But either way, I'm going to be glad we have it. But I want to echo what Derek said, that I really like how the kids are portrayed. They're a lot more sophisticated than you see in typically some other comics that have both kids and adults in them. And I like specifically how the women's roles are portrayed by the adults and by the kids. The Bridget Lee is certainly the hero of this, and then we also see some male-female relationships among the kids, some bantering back and forth, which is really, really good to see, because I think there's some really important stuff there. And you can tell too that they're looking up to the adults, and without giving too much away, they also want to play an important role in this story.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really looking forward to hearing, on my limited level as a librarian, I'm looking forward to hearing the reader response, the adult response, and the kids' response as well.
Right. Actually, let me ask you a question. So what is the difference actually, like in terms of age, between like a juvenile fiction and teen fiction? Is it kind of like just a few years, or?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. What we do in our library system is juvenile fiction is pretty much anything from birth till about age 12, and then from 13 up is pretty much anything in the teen years goes into the young adult section.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to pick your brain a little bit, because I know, like, I've had other people tell me that, like, once a comic book or a graphic novel contains something like guns, it immediately changes, like, its complexion to the librarian or to the library system. Like, you know, like, they can't have, like, even space guns can't be shown to someone that's too young. Is that true, or is that just someone kind of giving me a false flag or something?
Well, you know, it could be in their system. I mean, I don't remember. We typically don't get too many complaints about violence in graphic novels, whether it's kids or teens. It's usually sexual issues that we get the complaints about. But it's interesting because, yeah, I've talked to other librarians in other systems that put Nanjing in the young adult section, and we actually have it in the adult section. So I guess maybe it varies from system to system.
Yeah, one of the big things we had to change for Bridget Lee is the scene where you see Bridget looking after Zahn, the older lady.
Mm-hmm.
A fun fact, by the way, Zahn is actually my mom's name. So she's kind of.
I was going to ask if there's any of your mother in Zahn as well as in Bridget Lee.
Yeah, Zahn is really kind of another cartoony personification of my mom. You'll notice that Zahn kind of looks a little bit like my mom from Tails as well, with like the hair and everything. But yeah, there's like some elements of my mom in Bridget Lee. There's also some elements of my wife. And I know that sounds really weird to say, to combine those two characters into one. But yeah, like that's the thing with Bridget Lee. She's not some projection of whatever male fantasy I have. Like she exists as a hero, a protagonist first and foremost. And like, for instance, when Bridget Lee says, "Shut your pie hole," that's something that my wife says all the time, which is hilarious because it's a little anachronistic. And, she gets it from her dad, who's this 70-year-old blue collar worker who was in Korea. So like, that's the kind of shit that just kind of flows out of his mouth whenever we're at a family gathering. But so the one thing we had to change was I couldn't mention alcohol. Like when Bridget was giving Zahn medical advice, it was to not drink so much. I was going to call it mock vodka because it was going to be a reference to the fact that they don't actually have the soil to grow real potatoes. And then there was going to be a joke about how there's no real potatoes. And then my editor said, we can't have that. We can't have references to alcoholism. And so it just became punch. Which is
I wondered about that.
It was a little silly.
I wondered too. Yeah.
Okay, so the punch issue now has been explained. I was wondering what kind of punch is that? Well, it's like every punch, I guess. It's just going to be like some kind of like fake sugary drink that's easy for them to make in large quantities in this rough terrain world. I might touch. I think as the series, hopefully as the series goes on. I know we're going to talk about that later too, whether or not the series will go on. Hopefully, as the series goes on, I get to talk more about things like, what kind of rations there actually are, like what kind of food do they actually get to eat, and things like that. And I think really cheap food is actually a product of a society's need. Like the Great Depression brought about more people canning their food, and like food that's cheap and easy to store, because now it's like, hey, food is very precious because we're all really dirt poor. And so I think I want to touch upon that in Bridget Lee. Like, you've seen other sci-fi shows like Firefly touch upon that, where, even in the pilot episode, the one thing that they're all after is actually sustenance. And the gold bars turn out to just be protein and carb food chunks, so to speak. Like, it's just these big, disgusting brown food chunks. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the potential continuation of this series. Now, I mean, I just assumed that this was the first in a projected series for a couple of reasons. One, by the title itself, right? It's called The Battles of Bridget Lee, so it's not the battle, it's the battles, plural. And then the subtitle, Invasion of Farfall. So, this is the first installment of something that I would assume would be ongoing. But then also, getting into the book itself, there are a variety of elements there that could be fleshed out, could be teased out, expanded upon in subsequent installments of the Bridget Lee saga. And so the content, I got a feeling, okay, there's going to be more to this. And I'm assuming that you have the next, 2 or more volumes in mind, at least roughly?
Yeah, I actually have very detailed outlines of the second volume and a fairly detailed outline of the third one. And those subsequent 2 volumes would kind of give you kind of a vague ending. It wouldn't tie up all the storylines, but it would tie up enough that it would give the reader a lot of closure. But all of that would really ultimately depend on one really boring element, which is sales. It's just, it's just the nature of. I also self-published comics in the past, and it's just, yeah. I mean, even though Dark Horse is a great publisher and has a lot of resources, it's so hard to kind of push a new product out there, and especially, with Dark Horse's presence in the book market, like when I talk to people who aren't in comics, and I'm pretty sure you guys run across this as well, people just assume like, oh wow, you have a publisher, and oh wow, they have good distribution, everything must be set, and that's just simply not the case. It's just like, just bookstores. If you get a book into a bookstore, it doesn't just mean like, oh, that means it's going to be next to The Walking Dead, right? Right on the front display. Like, no, it's like if you're lucky, it won't get lost in a gigantic pile of books that all blend in together once all you see is the spine. And like you hope that one of the people stocking the book will give it like a nice employee's pick or something like that. But like, yeah, that's just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. Like it's so hard to just get any real notice that makes you stand out above everything else, just because there's so much good material out there. I know that sounds really pessimistic. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be such a downer today, but yeah, I mean, I'm hoping Bridget Lee does pick up steam, and I hope that it will reach its eventual fan base that's strongly passionate about the material. But I also know that it's going to be an uphill battle, so I have to plan like 4 steps ahead. Like, okay, if I can't do 9 volumes, I'll do 7. Okay, if I can't do 7, I'll do 2. And in order to get those 2 done, I may have to sacrifice certain things like my advance, or I might have to sacrifice certain things like, I don't know, something else. Like I might have to do a project in order to get Bridget Lee, the next 2 volumes of Bridget Lee greenlit. Like, that's how the game works sometimes.
Yeah. I was gonna mention that Nanjing was a critical success. I have no idea how it did in terms of sales, but it strikes me that what you're doing with the Battles of Bridget Lee, Invasion of Farfall, is wise in terms of sales and its potential longevity. In that Nanjing is hardcover book, and it's in black and white, which I think works well with what that story is. Battles of Bridget Lee, though, it's a paperback, and it's in color. And the reason I think that's important is, and right now I'm looking, I think Andy is as well, reading from a PDF of the Battles of Bridget Lee. So I'm not exactly sure what it looks like in hard copy yet, but my guess is that it being paperback, it being in color, it's something that would suggest a kind of an easier attempt at serialization, at least in terms of sales. Also, it reminds me of something like what I guess First Second has done with Paul Pope's Battling Boy, right? Those books are in paperback, in color, so they're like expanded comic books in many ways that read in a serial manner like a comic book. It just strikes me that the Battles of Bridget Lee works in a similar way. Yeah,
that's certainly our aim. I would love to have Paul Thorpe's numbers. If I'm just being frank, I would love to have Paul Thorpe's numbers. Yeah, I mean, the Battles of Bridget Lee, I don't know if Mike Richardson want me to talk about this, but whatever, I'm just going to say it. It's made money. It's like, and a big part of the reason why it made money is because a big factor was the fact that it's also printed in 4 languages. Because we got a lot of foreign deals right away because I had already finished half of it before Dark Horse picked it up, and they were able to just kind of send it to other licensors at a really fast pace. So yeah, we have a Spanish edition, we have a French edition, and we have a Chinese edition that should be coming out soon. And the Chinese market, now that one is the one that's a little, I don't want to use the word dubious, but like it's unknown territory, just because China's a huge country, and from what I've heard from people living there in like Shanghai, they're saying that like, yeah, I mean, comics are certainly a known entity, but they're not. It's not like in Japan or in France or even America, for that matter, where it's something that's seen as a respected medium. Certainly not at Japan's level or France's level. So we're just gonna have to wait and see how well it does in Japan. In China. Like, you know, will the audience or the potential audience gravitate towards this story, which they probably know very, very well because it's such a strong flashpoint in their, not just their cultural identity, but their historical identity. Will they gravitate towards this art? Will they gravitate towards this approach to the narrative? I had a guy in Shanghai tell me that like he loved Nanjing, the Burning City, simply because it didn't feel like propaganda. He said it felt like, you know, a Saving Private Ryan style story, but just happens to have Chinese characters in it and deal with the Chinese historical flashpoint. So I was like, thank you. That's kind of what I was going for.
Well, Ethan, I'm gonna ask all of my, here on the podcast, I'm gonna ask all of my librarian friends to promote the new book, Bridget Lee, which you should just display in as many places as possible. But I also want, we will help you. We'll do.
I'm begging you, please. It's like, you know, the humility and shame is something I threw out the window when I realized that like I had to do self promotion. I was like, you know what, enough with trying to be nonchalant and cool. I'm just like, when I meet a librarian, I'm just going to beg them, like, please please buy my books.
Well, Andy has librarian comics creds.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
and you got to get it out there. And I was going to mention too that when we did Nanjing last year, Derek and I did it on the review, and we talked about it. And when it came into the library, one of the first things I thought was, you know, teachers really need to pick up on this. You know, it's historical. It celebrates diversity, and although it's fiction, you know, like you said, it's a historical backdrop. The things in Nanjing could have happened, and maybe even did happen on many individual levels. So I was hoping that teachers would embrace the book, kind of like they do with March, with the 3 volumes of March. I don't know if that's been the case, but maybe you could speak to how much feedback you've gotten from teachers, educators from Nanjing.
I've had a couple librarian friends tell me that the book was really, you know, some felt that it was really important to exist, simply because, it touches upon a subject that it's very hard, I think, in general, just to get kids interested in history. You know, just because, you know, you go to school and you're going to be there for 8 hours and you have all these subjects being thrown at you, so it's hard to absorb things, even in the best schools and with the most attentive students. So I think there were librarians and teachers that I've heard from who told me, you know, it's nice to have something that they can present to a student and get them interested in something, and just something else besides whatever crap they're looking at on their smartphone, just something that was substantial, something that was interesting, and something that had some academic and historical relevance. So, I mean, some of the criticisms I've gotten about the book are criticisms that I think a lot of people have told me, which is that it feels really short. And that's one of the main things. I could defend the fact that it feels really short, but it's fine. Like that was one of the risks I took by having so many silent scenes, which is, you know, when in some ways it's a benefit, in some ways it's a curse. If I put in a lot of silent scenes, and they're done really well, and the visual storytelling is crystal clear, then the reader is not really going to have to stop and think about what they're looking at. They glance at it and they immediately process the information because it's visually easy to track. Now, the risk I run is now you're not stopping to read anything. You glanced at it, you know what's happening. That page took you 3 seconds to read instead of 30 seconds or a minute. So, yeah, you can finish the whole book in 20 minutes. What I prefer people to do is really take their time to try to absorb the visual information so that it takes you closer to 30 or 40 minutes to read it. But, yeah, I can't really control how fast or how slow someone reads the comic, which is also really one of the great things about the comic medium, which is you really control your own pace, and it doesn't change how you absorb the comic, really, because, you slow down a movie, the movie's slowed down. It's not meant to, if you play it at like 12 frames per second, it's going to feel different versus, versus reading a comic. All right, I'm going to take a whole hour to read Paper Girls #1 or something like that. You can finish that issue in like 15 minutes, but you can also take a whole hour and just kind of I want to glance that dialogue bubble again. I want to look at Cliff Chang's art just a little bit more here and examine the color scheme in this scene. And the experience is still roughly the same. And that's one of the great things about comics. And that's just me. I'm sorry. That's me going off on a tangent about how great comics are. But, yeah, I've gotten good feedback from librarians and from teachers. Generally from an educational standpoint. I mean, I don't know what the kids think about the art, so that's that's up to them.
Well, that's interesting because that brings us back, at least in some way, to an earlier question that we were discussing, and that is where to put your book in the library. And I had mentioned that on the back of Battles of Bridget Lee, we have, the marketing folk put juvenile fiction, comics and graphic novels, and then general. So, that's very useful for a bookstore owner or a librarian as to where they may place the book. But, it's that second designation, comics and graphic novels, I think, when it comes to books. And Andy, maybe I'm off base here, so you tell me if I am. In terms of libraries, I think that even if they're very sophisticated comics, people, I think most patrons would tend to think that if it's a comic, then it would be in a younger reader section, especially when it comes to how we consume the book, right? And if it doesn't take that long to read the text, then we tend to think that it's not that adult, it's not that sophisticated. It's something that can be read in 15, maybe 30, 45 minutes. And so, we're definitely not talking about Moby Dick here, right? We're talking about, even the most sophisticated comic is going to have a relatively brief acquisition time. So, and I would guess that with most readers or patrons, if we're talking about libraries, they would tend to think, well, because the time to consume it is so short, it must be for a younger and maybe being unspoken, a less sophisticated readership.
Well, we have this problem all the time in the library, and most of the people, and I'm talking kids and parents, that go to the juvenile section where we have graphic novels, they expect those to be light and funny. Mm-hmm. They expect it to be, My Little Pony. They expect it to be, that type of thing, very, very light, Peanuts. And when they see something that might be war-related or serious, like I was mentioning this to somebody not long ago, Rust, the series by Royd and Lepp. Mm-hmm. They look at something like that and they think, what's this doing here? This is in the wrong section. This should be for an older person. But it's not. And that's one of the challenges that I have as a librarian in educating kids and adults as to, yes, this is a story about war, but it is, and in this particular one is set with a science fiction backdrop, and it is appropriate for children. Maybe it's not light and fluffy like some of the other things are, but this is in the right section. Now, whether you think it's appropriate for your particular child to read, that's for you to determine. But we have designated it to go into this section.
Mm. Mm. Well, thank you for putting it in the right section. if I may, thank you for that.
Oh, well,
yeah, I mean I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say we try to do our best, and sometimes we do get challenged on things, but again, it's usually things that are challenged because of the sexual nature of them, and rarely having anything to do with violence or more mature themes.
What about cigarettes? I heard that's the other big thing, like smoking and drugs, right?
Yeah. That's a big thing there, which is so funny.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I do understand like certain parents' concerns, like they don't want kids to see a really cool person smoking. Because I mean, let's face it, like the only reason anyone ever starts smoking in high school or junior high is because it's cool. There are no health benefits to it. There's absolutely no reason to actually smoke besides the fact that you're trying to fit in. So when you see someone really cool smoking, it's like, whoa, it gives you that extra incentive to try if you are already thinking about trying cigarettes. Mm-hmm. So I understand that. But at the same time, I do give kids, especially if they're like 12 or 13, I do give them a little bit more credit to not just mimic every single thing they see. But I mean, I don't know. Like when my son Elliot turns 12 or 13, I might feel different. I might be like, wow, this kid has no idea what he's doing. I better hide any reference to cigarettes visually or literary.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned cigarettes, because in this way, I think the Battles of Bridget Lee and even Nanjing, the Burning City are, I guess, more appropriate for younger readers than your webcomic Tails. Because in Tails, I mean, not only do we have characters who smoke, but also, there's language. Although I think if you show a potential reader who, let's say, knows nothing about your work, images from Tails and then images from Battles of Bridget Lee and Nanjing, they may think that Tails is for younger readers just by looking at the visuals, not the content, not the words.
Yeah, very much so, especially the fantasy elements in Tails with Crusader Cat. Yeah, that was an interesting hurdle when I was doing the comic, because when I first started it, the first 5 chapters of Tails, it was the webcomic was basically me revising the miniseries I had done from 04 to 05. And I published 3 issues. I self-published them. I didn't get a Xeric grant. Like, I tried so hard to get a Xeric grant and I couldn't get one. And rightfully so, because the original miniseries I did was just, it blew chunks. It was just so fucking terrible. And like, I look back now and like whenever someone brings me the issues to show me that they have them, I just want to steal them and burn them. Like, that's just, like you look at old work, like you just like, this looks so terrible, and I can't believe this was ever published in any professional light, at like let alone at actual comic shops for people to purchase and spend and throw their money away on this thing. In some aspects, I'm proud of the fact that I did it. Because I just churned it out and I had no idea what I was doing. And Diamond was just like, okay, I mean, it's good enough. We can certainly publish this. And, it was at the right price point. And it was really at a time when comic shops like comics had not really redefined themselves yet the way they have now. Even though you had a market that was kind of recovering from the bust, and you had like movies, and you had at the time the Ultimate Universe was taking off. You go into a comic shop, it was still kind of just really undefined. But now, like, you have the big 2 just redefining the universe every few years anyway. So, I felt a couple of big stories at the time kind of took, some chances on my original work. And then I did the webcomic, and it was just basically me being very self-indulgent, talking about my love life or lack of, and all the cats I was taking care of, blah, 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 all that, all that narcissistic stuff that 20-year-olds complain about. And then, I introduced the fantasy element. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, was like, hey, the fantasy stuff, maybe you should expand on that. And I took her advice, and then before you know it, it was like a 9-year, and it became this 9-year plunge into this webcomic. And it was just me just trying to figure out what it is I really wanted to do. Like, I like fantasy, I like genre, but I also like drama and comedy, and I also like quiet scenes, and I like big scenes. And when you read the webcomic as one long 400-page story, it's kind of all over the place. But I think one of the cool things is that you can kind of see how my art style goes from, someone who clearly grew up with like Art Adams and Chris Bachalo, to someone later on who discovers more European artists and indie artists and Japanese artists, and you just, while still maintaining some of that original flair. So I think that's one of the interesting things when I look back, like, I could see my progression from shitty artist to less shitty artist, and that's a good thing.
So, now you just wrapped up Tails, the webcomic, last year, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
And that ran for how long?
2015.
Yeah.
The webcomic ran from I want to say 08.
Was it 08?
So
Okay.
it ran for 7 years, I think. It was either 08 or 09, but I think it was. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. It was 09. So it ran for roughly 6 to 7 years.
Well, I mean, that's a big chunk of your life, and I'm wondering, when you wrapped this up last year, how did you feel?
A little empty inside, actually, to tell you the truth. It was during the height of the webcomics popularity. It was getting, 5,000 to 6,000 page views a day, which, it's not something to scoff at. I mean, it's not like, Kate Beaton numbers or something, but it was, I at least had that core fan base that I interacted with, that was very invested in this story. Mm-hmm. And the people who really got the comic and really loved it and knew what kind of genre mashing I was going for in terms of creating an interesting story, they saw the story for what it was, and they really connected with it. And it was really nice just kind of commenting with them when new pages went up. It was really nice getting emails with them, going back and forth. And there's a part of me that misses that. On Facebook or on Twitter or on Instagram, yeah, you interact with people, but it just didn't feel the same. There's just something a little less intimate about that because, on a big social media website, it's for everyone to see. So, yeah, that's just, I don't know. You kind of reach the end of the world and you're like, is this it? And you look out and like, oh well.
What do you see yourself going back to?
I wish I had a more profound answer. But
what do you see yourself going back to webcomics? I mean, not with Bridget Lee, but with other work.
Well, I'm working on that digital project for Stila now, Pilgrim Finch.
Okay.
But that's more for me to kind of like experiment with format, just because the Stila format's really interesting. And it doesn't. I don't know if Stila has the same interaction as other webcomics do, just because I don't have an iPhone and the app's only for iPhone. In terms of traditional webcomics, I mean, I might. I mean, I wouldn't take anything off the table, but I mean, I'm not gonna lie. When I first put Tails online, it was really just to reach a wider audience and get a book deal. And I know I didn't say that as any way to kind of denigrate webcomics as a whole. It's just, that's unfortunately just a reality for a lot of people who go into webcomics, which is a lot of them are just trying to spruce up their resume for a print publisher. Mm-hmm. And maybe my heart was never 100% into webcomics. I'd say 75% into it. I know you guys are friends with Sean Clefield, right?
Oh yeah, he's the we have a monthly webcomic series that actually is the idea of Andy Wolverton here, and he and I did that for a while, and then Andy stepped aside for the Young Reader series, and then, which is also his idea, and then we brought on Sean. So Sean's Mr. Webcomic.
Yeah, no, he was one of the big supporters of Tails from the very beginning. Yeah, if I ever did go back to webcomics, I might just do it on like a Tumblr or something, where it's just kind of like, half blog, half social network, and just kind of do it from there.
Yeah, kind of do the mini blog thing.
Yeah, but Andy, you were about to ask something, or?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about some of your artistic decisions that you made. I was noticing when I read Nanjing, and I was reading back over it this week in preparation for this, that a lot of the panel layout looks similar, and you have like a lot of three panels, horizontal panels to a page. And of course, Bridget Lee is, I'm assuming it's going to be a larger format. I'm looking at a PDF, but it seems like the larger page gives you more possibilities, but you still seem to like a lot of the horizontal panels, kind of a widescreen view. And I was wondering how much of that, I wondered if it was, how much of that is like cinematic. Is that something that carries over from watching a lot of movies, or is that just the best way that you thought the story played out?
a little bit of both and some in between as well. Definitely, I mean, I love TV and movies. TV is actually my favorite medium, and especially TV now is just, we're at the golden age of television right now. But I think after I quit college and I read The Authority, you guys remember The Authority, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I'm assuming. Yes, I'm assuming 2 comic fans with PhDs probably remember The Authority, but I just wanted to make sure. I think after reading The Authority and especially seeing Frank Quitely's work and how he loved to take cinematic approaches and to the way he laid out comics, and I don't think he was the first one to do it, but he was certainly one of the first to popularize it in American comics, because when he did his run on Authority, there really just was no American comic that looked like that. There was no American comic artist who was drawing characters looking so odd and eccentric. Like odd might be a mean word. Like they looked peculiar and idiosyncratic. Like his Apollo and his Midnighter, they didn't look traditionally handsome. They looked like, I don't know, like they'd just been drinking at a bar all night or something. This is the guys you would just find at a bar, but they're wearing superhero uniforms. They looked so unique, and like that was just one of the things that really drew me in about Frank Quitely's storytelling style. And so, later on, I incorporated more cinematic panels and panel layouts to Tails. When you see the first 5 to, I would say 5 to 8 chapters, the layouts are kind of just all over the place. I have no real distinct style as to how I want to tell my stories. It was just whatever the scene called for. If I needed, and some of the layouts, I think when I look back, just look a little haphazard and kind of thrown together. But it really wasn't until the end of Tails and then on to Nanjing where my more cinematic aesthetic kind of took over, and especially for Nanjing because I wanted these big, sweeping shots of the city. And I wanted to immerse the reader into the environment as much as possible. And silence plays a part in that, because within that silence, the reader really just becomes more of a witness than a participant. You're just basically sitting back and kind of looking and watching as this all happens instead of participating in it. And the more cinematic the shots became, the more I felt you had a tighter you had a more tangible grasp as to what it felt like to probably be there. You look at the photographs, there aren't that many photographs from Nanjing just because a lot of photographers weren't allowed in. But when you look at photographs of Wuhan from Robert Capa, I believe, and then Jack Burns did photographs in Shanghai in 1949 during the Civil War between the communists and the nationalists. And I looked at those photographs and I just felt there's a way to recreate this in comics, and the cinematic approach just turned out to be the best way.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned too about the silent nature of a lot of the panels in Nanjing, and you also see it in Bridget Lee as well. There's one page, and I'm not trying to give any spoilers away, that really captures everyone's response to what's about to happen. The Marauders are about to attack, and you see like these small close-ups, facial expressions as people are watching what's about to happen, and then you follow that with this wordless page of the ship coming down and the attack about to take place. It's really, really very effective. I'm impressed with the way you did it in Nanjing and the way you did it here. And again, it's somewhat cinematic because you get a little close up. What are they thinking? How are they feeling? And then bam, the event happens. It's got a lot of power to it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. When I first did the storyboards to pitch Bridget Lee, when it was still like, a 5-issue miniseries in my head, I was actually sticking to the 3 tiers that you see in Nanjing. Mm-hmm. But once the miniseries idea was scrapped and Jim presented me with the option to do an 80-page graphic novella, kind of like the Avatar books they do. Like that's mainly the reason why the book is in that 80-page format, because so there's 72 pages of content, so that's an 80-page graphic novella. Once you go over that, it's rare to find an 88-page graphic novella, so it becomes a 96-page graphic novel. So if I had done 80 pages, there would be 16 pages of design and filler. And I just didn't want that, because you're basically asking the customer, hey, give me $3 more for essentially nothing. And I just feel that's kind of unfair to the reader as well. That, and part of me, I was just probably being a little lazy. I was like, I don't want to do these 8 extra pages right now. I have a kid who's like sucking the life out of me. I just want to go. I just want to relax right now. And that's part of it. So yeah. If given the opportunity to do it exactly the way I wanted, not that I'm not happy with Bridget Lee, but if I could have widened the scope of the storytelling like I did with Nanjing and expanded it to 150 pages or 120 pages, yeah, I think you would see a lot more of the silence. You would see a lot more of the quiet, mundane scenes that I like to show. Just because I feel like in those moments, characters reveal more of their vulnerability, and I think that is what readers can really connect to. Like, you know, we connect to the action too, but vulnerability and quiet and solace, we connect to that, I think, just a little bit more.
So you were talking about the original idea of 5 volumes. Is that, I mean, if you had your way, would you have a 5-volume series, or might this be open-ended?
I think because of my obsession with prime numbers, like 5 or 7. But I'm okay with 3 as well. And I know 9 is not a prime number, but I kind of feel like it's a prime number's cousin, just because, you know, it's, I don't know, just, you know, something like that, where it could feel like a neat trilogy would be nice. But if it's something where it can be told in 3 volumes or 5 volumes, whatever the story really called for. But I just want to make sure that it doesn't feel rushed. That's probably my biggest regret about this first volume, which is because of its really short page run, I feel like there are just certain things that felt a little rushed. I felt like, looking back, I probably could have expanded on this relationship more, or that scene just a little bit more. Maybe it could have been 2 pages instead of a 1-page scene. All in all, I feel like even though I'm happy with the book, you know, there's always that part of me that feels like, I could have done better. And I know saying that is probably not the best way to promote a book. Like, you know, it's decent, but I could have done better. Give me your money now.
It's interesting to hear you say this, because, you know, as a reader, I did not get that feeling at all with the Battles of Bridget Lee. And one reason is that, I guess it's for something that I mentioned earlier. The content, well, one, you know, the title did suggest something that this is the first in a series. But then the way that it read, I just thought that whatever story material, whatever, you know, thickness of the narrative is not there, that's okay, because I'm going to get that in the next volumes. Just assuming that there would be more volumes, because it read like that. So, for example, I was rather intrigued by the minor character Bree in this book, and the things that intrigued me about her were the things that we don't know. And so I just thought to myself, okay, well, this is just one of several examples of a narrative element that'll be fleshed out in subsequent volumes. So given the length of this, I mean, I did notice that this is shorter than, let's say, most of the graphic novels, if we want to call them that, you know, that we would discuss for the show. But I just thought that this was the nature of the Battles of Bridget Lee, I assume, series. And so getting, I guess, less story that you feel that, you know, you wish you had in this first book, I didn't see that as a drawback at all. I thought of that in some ways as kind of a selling point.
Okay. Well, it's nice to know that you feel that way then. I really appreciate that. No, thank you. It's just that anyone who knows me knows how neurotic I am. So when I read even like a mediocre review of my book, like my immediate reaction is to, you know, scream F you at the screen as I'm reading it, and just get really, Like I was, this is going to sound really petty for a second, but I might as well expose it. I was really down on myself when I lost the Eisner for Nanjing, the Burning City. And this is not to say that Peter Cooper didn't deserve it. but it was just simply because I'm a very hyper competitive person. Even with, like, when doing Bridget Lee, I did everything besides editing it. I wrote it, drew it, colored it, and lettered it. And very few people do that. And it's mainly because, like, I want to have full control over what the final product is going to look like. I have very specific ideas of what color palette to use. I have very specific ideas of lighting. And so there's a part of me, that neurotic, controlling part, that just is hyper competitive and just really high strung. So yeah, even though I was happy for Peter Cooper, there was that part of me that's like, God damn it, why did I fail? Like, it was more just kind of like I brought shame upon myself or something. Like, I failed.
Wow.
Not at all a failure. No.
Well, getting back to the, I guess, potential seriality of this book, you mentioned that your favorite medium, especially right now in its golden age, as you put it, is television. It strikes me that after reading this first book, The Battles of Bridget Lee, Invasion of Farfall, this would make a good series.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure you wouldn't say no to something like that. I mean, was this in your head when you conceived of this story world?
Yeah, I think when you ask creators for their more diplomatic answer, they're going to say, no, I just want to make a good comic. That's a little bullshit, because everyone, no matter who you talk to, even if it's like a person making mini comics, they're thinking about the larger arc of their career and whether or not additional media is going to be a part of that. So yeah, I mean, because there was actually some interest in Nanjing as a film from a producer over in Shanghai, and it just fell through, mainly because, that's just what happens. And, hopefully in the future that the case might be different. There'll be another producer that finally gets it and can get the funding, for the rights and all that stuff. But yeah, there was a part of me while I was doing the book, like, I knew exactly which actress would be perfect for it right now. And that actress would be Constance Wu from Fresh Off the Boat. I think she would be perfect for Bridget Lee. I mean, I think she has the temperament. I think she has the skill level. When you see her act, I think, she balances the right emotions, whether it's being protective or being stern or being loving and being vulnerable, as I talked about before. That's an actress that encapsulates all of that and projects it really well. So yeah, there's a part of me that felt like, this was like a series or turned into whatever. I know which actors I would prefer, but that's also largely out of my hands. And the best I can hope for, I guess, is just my credit, or maybe someone would throw me like a bag of money one day. I don't know. So yeah, that's always in the back of my mind. But don't ever believe a creator when they say they don't think about licensing and like turning something into a movie or franchise. It's just that's complete BS.
Well, you mentioned the comics creating community. Do you have much of any relationship with other creators, or is it more an insular world for you?
I actually used to. Do you know Steve Ellis, who does The Only Living Boy?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's actually
we don't
my
know
neighbor.
Personally, but
yeah, not personally, but I do know the book. It's a good comic.
Him and David created a really great series, and I first met Steve when he was actually a part of the larger studios down in Brooklyn, New York, that just closed. The one in Gowanus, where Dean Haskell is. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're. Yeah. So his specific studio that I visited back in 2008, it was him, several other cartoonists, and then Becky Cloonan. And I remember meeting Becky Cloonan. I was a little starstruck. I was like, oh my God, you're Becky Cloonan. But he moved. He had a family, and so he moved up to Ithaca. Better schools, higher quality of living for whatever your income is. And then me and my wife moved up here too, and then we ran into each other at the local convention. And for like a whole year and a half, we got coffee every week. But then life got in the way, and eventually, like, the more projects you take on, the less time you have for socializing, which is unfortunate because, it is great to chat and talk shop with other creators and just kind of, equally vent your frustrations to one another, and you feel like you're not alone. You feel like, oh my God, you have that shit client as well. Like, that's the thing. Like, creators, I think, bond over shit more than bond over substance, or bond over mutual affection. Like, when you can vent with another person about how much you hate a certain client or how much you hate a certain story or character, like, that really brings you closer, I think, just because. And this sounds really immature, but there's that part of you that's still like stuck in high school where you're just kind of like, oh, I hate that person. Like, oh, I hate that person too. Great, let's be best friends while we're drinking this coffee. But yeah, like me and Steve, like, we bonded over like, oh, like, don't you hate that client who does this, and that? Like, every creator has that story where like they just have that nightmare client. Like, I had this fucking nightmare client when I was still starting out freelancing in 2008, who he was just this complete moron who just had like a shit ton of money. He had so much money. He lived off of 6th Avenue in Union Square, and his apartment had like a little beach house feel to the balcony. And if anyone's ever been to New York City, like, I grew up there, that is almost impossible to get unless you are filthy rich. And his ideas were so monumentally stupid. Like, and I had to sit there and listen to them because I was, I charged him $40 an hour for I guess R&D for this comic he wanted to do, and I got paid really well. But I had to listen to his bullshit. And like if there's any creators listening to this, like, there's a certain point where your pride can only take so much, where your dignity just says, stop it, the money is not worth it. And I eventually had to leave that client because he was just so terrible. Like, he was just a bad human being that wanted to make you feel terrible while you talk to him. So I'm sorry, that's my little tangent there. But yes, it's a very insular world, and I like to talk to other creators when I can.
So you're still a young father, and this is your first, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so how has the addition of your family, your new family member, been with your own work? Or is that kind of a stupid question?
No. You now feel, even without kids and without those responsibilities, I felt there was never enough time to do everything I wanted to do. And now there definitely isn't enough time. Before Elliot, I actually I could handle like 2 or 3 projects at the same time. Like, while I was doing Nanjing, I was actually working a day job for 6 months for animation domination, which was right in my wheelhouse, just because, when you're a comic book artist, you have to draw all these poses all the time. And that was my main job as character designer, to just draw these poses to give to the in-between animators. I was essentially doing the key poses. And, I did it well because, I did it efficiently. I didn't complain, and I just handed in my work on time. And then I would work on Nanjing until my wife got off from her shift at the hospital. And now, there's that part of me that wishes I could go back to that kind of work schedule because I got so much done. And now I just have to be a lot more prudent with my time. And if I can only work on one project, which is all I have time for now, it has to be the right project, whether it's creator owned or whether it's a freelance project that will pay me a little bit more. Just I can't take on like 3 jobs at the same time anymore, which I sometimes wish I could do.
So you have,
life with a freelancer.
Mm-hmm. So, the, relatively young family, and, you have this first Bridget Lee book out. In addition to maybe the next Bridget Lee story, what other things do you have cooking, if anything?
Yeah, I'm almost done with Pilgrim Finch right now for Stila. I'm up to chapter 7,
mm-hmm.
and it's 7 out of 10 chapters. Eventually, with my contract, I can publish a print volume of that 6 months after it premieres on the app. I know Evan Dorkin and Sarah Dyer's series, Kala Cthulhu, is that what it's called?
Kala Cthulhu, yeah.
Kala Cthulhu. That recently got a book deal at Dark Horse as well.
Yeah, I saw that.
Just because,
that's interesting.
Yeah, I like print. I do. I like digital as well. So this is not knocking the Stila app at all. I like digital. I like what they're trying to do, but I also like print. So yeah, I'd eventually like to get a print deal for that. I would love to get an omnibus version of Tails print it out just because it's it's 9 years of my life. I would like something solid and hard, like a hard copy to show for my my massive investment of time and sanity. And then for the next project, I think maybe for 2017, I just, besides doing some conventions and promoting Nanjing and Bridget Lee, I think I might just take it easy and just do some freelance work and maybe just one small creator project. I just had this idea in my mind today, I'd like to do 48 pages of a comic that's just all action, like all kung fu action and monsters, and that has absolutely no substance at all. Like, it's all style, and it's just like a visual delight. Like, just something like that where I don't even have to think about it while I'm doing it, where it's just like second nature. And I'm sure if any editors are listening to right now, they're like, that sounds like a terrible idea. No one's going to publish that. To which my response is, fuck you. But anyway, but hopefully there's going to, either my editor at Dark Horse or an editor somewhere is going to see the potential in that. I'm thinking about doing it in black and white with gray tones like Nanjing, so it'll be cheaper to produce. People ask me that all the time, ooh, why is Bridget Lee in color and why is Nanjing in black and white? And I think they're expecting a more sophisticated answer than the one I give, which is money. When I had finished 90 pages of Nanjing, self-publishing was an option, and it seemed like maybe the default option for a while because it got turned down by other publishers. Nanjing has that story that you hear that sounds very that sounds very dramatically refreshing, which is kind of it was turned down by everyone, but then finally the right publisher picked it up, which happened. But it's just when publishers were turning down Nanjing and for whatever reasons, legitimate reasons, they couldn't publish it, I was like, oh well, if I have to self-publish it, black and white is just that much cheaper.
Well, now Dark Horse has done Nanjing. They're doing the Bridget Lee. Do you think that they may be interested in doing this omnibus edition you referred to of Tails?
I think so. The funny thing is, I actually sent it to my editor, but my editor is just he's just so inundated with so much work right now, just because, they're leading up to New York Comic Con, and they have, there's so many new projects that are coming out. So I don't blame him for being busy right now. But yeah, I'm just speaking from the impatient part of me, the impatient neurotic part, which is every day that passes where my editor doesn't say Tails is approved, I'm basically sitting at my computer why does he hate me? Why do people hate me? And I go to my wife Carol, why do people hate me? And Carol has to put up with all my bullshit all the time.
Now, will you be at New York?
Yes, I will. I will be mainly Friday of New York Comic Con. I will be doing two panels, one which is about military comics and one which is about Asian American creators. Both are Dark Horse sponsored panels, and then I'm doing a signing at the Dark Horse booth. But I'll be at the majority of Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I'll be at booth 143 for whoever's listening who will be there, helping to promote the kids comic that I do with my friend Todd Emco, which is called A Piggy's Tale. And his three-legged dog named Piggy will actually be there. We've been there the past 2 years now, and people love the dog, and they come in, and then once they're in the booth with a three-legged dog, at that point, it would be rude for them not to buy something. So that's how we draw them in. You see a cute puppy,
smart,
and then we take their money. Yeah, no, it is. I mean, in some ways, we're kind of exploiting this three-legged dog, but hey, he gets food and shelter, so he's got a good life. The least he can do is make some money for us.
That's right, and he doesn't know he's being exploited.
Yeah, no, he's a dog. Come on, he doesn't know. And we love him. We love the dog. We're not just shoving him out into the aisle, but it's hard not to notice the fact that he's also a service dog too. That's one of the reasons why he's there. But it's hard not to notice that there's this adorable three-legged dog, and then you see this really colorful comic. And it's a fun kids comic, and we're putting out the graphic novel. It'll be in comic shops October 12th, but we're premiering it that first Thursday at New York Comic Con, and it's going to be exciting. A lot of families gravitate towards that comic, and they really like it. So, what can I say except give me more of your money? Like, wow. I wish I had something more profound to say at the end of that, but like, no, just give me your money.
Wow. So October is a double shot for you.
Yeah.
Well, Ethan, we want to thank you again for being on the Comics Alternative, and good luck with the sales of both of these books.
Oh, thank you so much, Derek. And Andy, thank you so much, too, especially for the insights into the library system as well. And I appreciate all the support from the library end.
Well, you're very welcome, and we'll keep it going.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me.
Okay, take care, Ethan.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, Derek, we had a really, really great time talking to Ethan Young about his new book, Bridget Lee, and also Nanjing and some of the other things that he's been working on. And, we were both talking after the interview and actually we're talking with Ethan himself about how nice it is just to be able to talk to creators and them being totally honest and upfront with us about so many things, not just the creative process, but everything that goes into putting a book like this together.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things I enjoyed and very much appreciated about our conversation with Ethan was the fact that he was so forthright, right? That he told us how he felt about this stuff. That's great. That came out, that genuineness. So, Ethan, thank you again for being on the Comics Alternative podcast.
Yes, thanks, Ethan. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's one that he listens to regularly, so he is a fan of the show.
There you go.
Yes. And if you want to be smart, like Ethan Young, you listen to the Comics Alternative, but you would be even smarter to get your comics from our sponsor, which is Discount Comic Book Service. How was that for a segue? Yeah. Go to dcbservice.com. There you're going to find great specials every single month. You can't go wrong with those guys. And after you do get your comics there, get in touch with us and let us know what you think about our conversation with Ethan Young. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can send us a voicemail through the wonders of SpeakPipe, which is really easy to use. Or if you want to be a little more difficult about things, then pick up the phone and call us at 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
You can also contact us by email. We are 2guys@comicsalternative.com. You can get in touch with us individually. I'm Wolverton at comicsalternative.com. And Derek, how can people reach you?
At Derek@comicsalternative.com.
You can also find us on Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, and Pinterest. And if you'd like to find out new content to the blog and to the podcast, you can follow us on Twitter. We are at the number 2guys with PhDs, and we appreciate everybody that retweets our tweets.
That's right. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, and on iHeartRadio. And if you're an Android user, you can find us on Google Play Music. But you can still find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and the comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, which is comicsalternative.com.
Yeah, we hope you will let us know how we're doing and let us know about the books you're reading.
Yeah, exactly. And we hope you enjoyed our conversation with Ethan Young. We're going to have more fun interviews like these in the weeks to come, so listen up for those. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy.
We'll see you later.